That's Jupiter and Saturn right there.
Today, December 21st, 2020, Jupiter and Saturn will appear the closest in the sky they have since 1623. Every 20 years or so, Jupiter and Saturn line up in the sky in an event known as the Great Conjunction. The two planets come very close together, and during some conjunctions they appear closer than others. But why does this happen? And why does it happen every 20 years? Now, to understand why this happens, consider the planets orbiting the Sun. Here's Jupiter and here's Saturn. Now, they both orbit around the Sun, but Jupiter moves faster while Saturn moves slower. Now, Johannes Kepler states in his third law of planetary motion that the square of the orbital period of the planet is proportional to the cube of its average distance to the Sun. So essentially what Kepler was saying is that planets closer to the Sun orbit faster, and planets further away from the Sun orbit slower. For example, Earth takes 1 year to orbit the Sun. Jupiter is much further away, so it takes about 12 years to orbit the Sun. Saturn takes about 29 years to orbit the Sun. And Pluto takes about 248 years to go around the Sun. So as Jupiter and Saturn orbit around the Sun, because Jupiter is a little bit closer, it orbits faster. And so every now and then it makes a lap around Saturn, and at some point they line up. This happens about every 20-ish years or so. But they don't come right on top of each other, and that's because Jupiter and Saturn's orbital planes don't line up perfectly. They're pretty close, but not exact. If Jupiter orbits like this, Saturn orbits like this, about 1 degree inclined from Jupiter. Different points along their orbital paths are closer together, and that's why different great conjunctions have Jupiter and Saturn appearing closer or further away from each other. Depending on where Jupiter and Saturn are in their orbits, it changes how close the two planets appear in the sky. And this time around in 2020, they happen to be really close to each other, just about 6 arc minutes away. An arc minute, by the way, is 1/60th of a degree, so 6 arc minutes equals 0.1 degrees. That's about the apparent thickness of a dime held at arm's length. On December 12th, Jupiter and Saturn are pretty close together in the sky, but as December 21st nears, the two planets will draw closer and closer. So the sun has just set a little while ago, and I'm setting up my telescope to witness the Great Conjunction of 2020. Just by looking up into the sky, you can see Jupiter and Saturn there. Very close together. They appear pretty much as just one point of light. You can just barely see Saturn there on the right side of Jupiter.
So there it is, the Great Conjunction. Jupiter and Saturn are about 6 arc minutes apart, 1/10 of a degree. You can't see it very clearly in the video, but through the telescope you can see Saturn's rings. Saturn being the smaller and dimmer planet on the right, and Jupiter larger and brighter on the left. You can also see Jupiter's 4 Galilean moons through the telescope: Io, Ganymede, Europa, and Callisto. And there they are. That star right there, that's Jupiter and Saturn. Kind of blurry here, but through the telescope you can see them a bit clearer.
So there you have it, the Great Conjunction of 2020. And if you missed it this year, there will be another conjunction in 2040 and in 2060, but unfortunately those won't be nearly as close. However, in 2080, there will be another conjunction similar to the one that occurred today. The two planets will be about 6 arc minutes apart, the same apparent distance as today's conjunction. And if you're cryogenically frozen and live to see the year 7514, you will get to see Jupiter come right in front of Saturn. the two planets will line up perfectly in the sky, and from our perspective, it'll look like Jupiter is touching Saturn. But until then, we'll have to settle for today's Great Conjunction.
And if you're watching this video a few days after it comes out, you can still go see Jupiter and Saturn. They'll be pretty close together in the sky, just not quite as close as they were tonight. Just after the sun sets, go look southwest, and the brightest planet in the sky will be Jupiter next to its neighbor Saturn. But as the week continues and into the next month, the two planets will slowly draw further and further away from each other. Thanks for watching.